started crossing himself. "You are right, what an idiotic face," remarked the wounded gentleman with a forced smile. "Go and fetch the water, damn you!" shouted Bazarov. "There's no need, it was a momentary vertigo. Help me to sit up. There, that's right. I only need something to bind up this scratch, and I can reach home on foot, or else you can send for a droshky for me. The duel, if you agree, need not be renewed. You have behaved honorably. Today, take note." "There's no need to recall the past," answered Bazarov, "and as regards the future, it's not worth breaking your head about that either, for I intend to move off from here immediately. Let me bind up your leg now. Your wound is not dangerous, but it's always better to stop the bleeding. But first I must bring this corpse to his senses." Bazarov shook Pyotr by the collar and sent him off to fetch a droshky. "Mind you, don't frighten my brother," Pavel Petrovich said to him. "Don't inform him on any account." Pyotr dashed off, and while he was running for a droshky, the two antagonists sat on the ground in silence. Pavel Petrovich tried not to look at Bazarov; he did not want to be reconciled to him in any case. He felt ashamed of his own arrogance, of his failure. He was ashamed of the whole affair he had arranged, even though he realized it could not have ended more auspiciously. "At least he won't go on hanging around here," he consoled himself by thinking. "One should be thankful even for that." The prolonged silence was oppressive and awkward. Both of them felt ill at ease, each was conscious that the other understood him. For friends such a feeling is agreeable, but for those who are not friends it is most unpleasant, especially when it is impossible either to come to an understanding or to separate. "Haven't I bound up your leg too tight?" asked Bazarov at last. "No, not at all, it's excellent," answered Pavel Petrovich, and added after a pause, "We can't deceive my brother; he will have to be told that we quarreled about politics." "Very good," said Bazarov. "You can say that I cursed all Anglomaniacs." "All right. What do you suppose that man thinks about us now?" continued Pavel Petrovich, pointing at the same peasant who had driven the hobbled horses past Bazarov a few minutes before the duel, and who was now going back again along the same road, and took off his cap at the sight of the "masters." "Who knows him?" answered Bazarov. "Most likely of all he thinks about nothing. The Russian peasant is that mysterious unknown person about whom Mrs. Radcliffe used to say so much. Who can understand him? He doesn't understand himself." "Ah, so that's what you think," Pavel Petrovich began, then suddenly exclaimed, "Look what your fool of a Pyotr has done! Here's my brother galloping towards us." Bazarov turned round and saw Nikolai Petrovich sitting in a droshky, his face pale. He jumped out before it had stopped and ran up to his brother. "What does this mean?" he called out in an agitated voice. "Evgeny Vassilich, what is this?" "Nothing," answered Pavel Petrovich. "They have alarmed you quite unnecessarily. We had a little dispute, Mr. Bazarov and I have had to pay for it a little." "But for heaven's sake, what was it all about?" "How shall I explain? Mr. Bazarov alluded disrespectfully to Sir Robert Peel. I hasten to add that I am the only person to blame in all this, and Mr. Bazarov has behaved honorably. I challenged him." "But you're covered with blood." "Well, did you suppose I had water in my veins? But this bloodletting positively does me good. Isn't that so, doctor? Help me to get into the droshky, and don't give way to gloomy thoughts. I shall be quite well tomorrow. That's it, excellent. Drive off, coachman." Nikolai Petrovich followed the droshky on foot. Bazarov lagged behind. "I must ask you to look after my brother," Nikolai Petrovich said to him, "until we get another doctor from the town." Bazarov nodded his head without speaking. An hour later Pavel Petrovich was already lying in bed, with a skillfully bandaged leg. The whole house was upset. Fenichka felt ill. Nikolai Petrovich was silently wringing his hands, while Pavel Petrovich laughed and joked, especially with Bazarov. He had put on a fine cambric nightshirt, an elegant morning jacket, and a fez. He did not allow the blinds to be drawn down, and humorously complained about the necessity of not being allowed to eat. Towards night, however, he grew feverish. His head ached. The doctor arrived from the town. Nikolai Petrovich would not listen to his brother, nor did Bazarov want him to. He sat the whole day in his room, looking yellow and angry, and only went in to the invalid for as brief a visit as possible. Twice he happened to meet Fenichka, but she shrank away from him in horror. The new doctor advised a cooling diet; he confirmed, however, Bazarov's assurance that there was no danger. Nikolai Petrovich told him that his brother had hurt himself accidentally, to which the doctor replied, but on having 25 silver rubles slipped into his hand on the spot, he remarked, "You don't say so. Well, such things often happen, of course." No one in the house went to bed or undressed. Nikolai Petrovich from time to time went in on tiptoe to his brother's room and tiptoed out again. Pavel Petrovich dozed, sighed a little, told his brother in French, "Couchez-vous," and asked for something to drink. Nikolai Petrovich sent Fenichka in to him once with a glass of lemonade. Pavel Petrovich looked at her intently and drank off the glass to the last drop. Towards morning the fever had increased a little; a slight delirium started. At first Pavel Petrovich uttered incoherent words; then suddenly he opened his eyes, and seeing his brother beside his bed, anxiously leaning over him, he murmured, "Don't you think, Nikolai, Fenichka has something in common with Nellie?" "What Nellie, Pavel dear?" "How can you ask that? With Princess R. Especially in the upper part of the face. C'est de la même famille." Nikolai Petrovich made no answer, but inwardly he marveled at the persistent vitality of old passions in a man. "This is what happens when it comes to the surface," he thought. "Ah, how I love that empty creature," groaned Pavel Petrovich, mournfully clasping his hands behind his head. "I can't bear that any insolent upstart should dare to touch," he muttered a few minutes later. Nikolai Petrovich only sighed; he never even suspected to whom these words referred. Bazarov came to see him on the following day at 8 o'clock. He had already managed to pack and had set free all his frogs, insects and birds. "You have come to say good by to me?" said Nikolai Petrovich, getting up to meet him. "Exactly." "I understand and fully approve of you. My poor brother is of course to blame, but he has been punished for it. He told me that he made it impossible for you to act otherwise. I believe that you could not avoid this duel, which to some extent is explained by the almost constant antagonism of your different points of view." Nikolai Petrovich began to get rather mixed up in his words. "My brother is a man of the old school, hot-tempered and obstinate. Thank God that it has only ended in this way. I have taken all possible precautions to avoid publicity." "I'll leave you my address in case there's any fuss," said Bazarov casually. "I hope there will be no fuss, Evgeny Vassilich. I am very sorry that your stay in my house should have come to such an end. It distresses me all the more on account of Arkady's." "I expect I shall see him," replied Bazarov, in whom every kind of explanation and pronouncement